We've been holding these bi-monthly for over 7 years, I think, now. So we've never missed a month or an alternate month. So this has become a community ritual that I think a lot of us really appreciate. So just welcoming you to this edition. Thanks especially to those of you who come frequently. Would love to hear your updates in the chat, as I say. We're going to give you a fairly brief rundown of what ROR has been doing and what ROR plans to do from different members of the teams, from different aspects of ROR's work. Then we're going to hear, I do apologize. I think I have these in the wrong order. I think we have Crossref funder name to ROR ID matching before the Flemish organization registry. I will fix these before I share the slides. But nevertheless, we are going to hear both from Peter Aspeslagh of ECOOM and from Jason Portenoy of Crossref on two very interesting uses of ROR. And we will hear those in the opposite order than they are on this agenda slide. And then we'll take some time for your questions and comments, including questions to the speakers, questions to the ROR team, suggestions for anything you'd like to ROR to be doing that we're not already doing. We're trying to leave more space for this time than we did last time. We hold these calls every other month, as I mentioned. We focus on what ROR is doing, what we're planning to do, any topics we'd like your feedback on. We're hoping you'll get the announcements. Obviously, if you're here, you probably did get the announcement somewhere. We really encourage you to actively participate in the chat in particular. Feel free to ask questions in the chat. Feel free to chat with one another in the chat. And if you find links and things in there that are valuable, you can always download the chat and save that. Our wonderful team member Riley is going to be sharing the links in the slides in the chat. We do record these calls, and we'll send the recordings to you afterward to everyone who's registered. And we will also post them publicly on our website and on our YouTube channel. So the recording and the slides will both be available after the meeting. We ask you to abide by our code of conduct, which does include a banning of AI note takers from our meetings. We know that some people can find these useful, but we would rather not have this data used in training if at all possible. But if you do want to hear the call in another language, you can always click Show Captions in Zoom. Zoom's auto captioning feature is quite good, and so we encourage you to do that. The ROR community calls are one of the primary ways to be involved with ROR, but there are plenty of other ways. You can always submit feature requests, schema change requests, anything else that you like on the ROR roadmap, which is openly available on GitHub, and we have the link here. We have two separate discussion forums where you can ask questions or share and brag about your own ROR integrations. We have a community forum, which is essentially for general things. And we have a technical forum where we announce all updates to the ROR registry, which usually happen at least once a month, usually twice a month, as well as any forthcoming changes to the ROR API or anything about how ROR operates technically. One of the most popular ways to be involved in ROR is to submit a curation request, meaning ask for a new ROR ID or ask for a change to an existing ROR ID. That is also open. Anyone can do that. We encourage you to do that. And then, of course, you can always tell us about how you're using ROR or planning to use ROR. I've asked you to add some of that in the chat, but we do have a more structured form where you can submit that form link and then be listed as an official ROR integrator on the ROR website. So we'd always love to hear from you about that. So now we're going to go into some brief news and updates about what we've been up to before we hear from our featured presenters. We just have a couple of recent blog posts. We did a case study actually right after the previous community call about how Europe PMC partnered with SciLife Lab to help expose their publications in Europe PMC by linking all of their all the research publications that came out of SciLife Lab's support in Europe PMC. So you can now do a nice filter, which is clearly explained in the blog post, to find all of the publications that were supported by SciLife Lab. And I think they are treating that kind of as a pilot, as something that they might do for additional entities in the future. So that's an interesting one if you'd like to see that. Our own Fearless, intrepid, and brilliant director Maria Gould, who is here today, wrote a lengthy post about evaluating ROR against the principles of open science, open scholarly infrastructure, which is something we take very seriously. ROR is community-driven infrastructure. It is open infrastructure. We take these principles very, very seriously. And so we've done our most recent evaluation explaining how we make sure that ROR adheres to these principles. And you can take a look at that on our blog at any time you like. Some recent events. I attended Elsevier Impact Conference in San Diego. And for those of you who are on the ROR community list, you may have seen some chat about ROR in Elsevier products there. I think we gave a good talk there about ROR. Most people were familiar with ROR. This was a conference mainly for Elsevier users, but I got to speak to many Elsevier product managers as well, and I think those conversations were very fruitful and might have good outcomes in the future. So that was actually a very good conference. Really enjoyed it. I went to the Council of Science Editors meeting, which is local to me, and also I think at that point, probably talked to more than nearly a dozen publishers, mostly managing editors, who had heard of ROR and who I think were highly incentivized to check on whether their production vendors are including ROR IDs in their Crossref metadata. So that was a great meeting. We have another ROR community call coming up in July, and we have some plans for that, but we don't have a finalized agenda yet. So we will certainly let you know when we do. You can register for that now if you like. Maria and Adam from the ROR team will be attending Force 2026 in Singapore in early June and giving a talk there on research integrity. And then, of course, PIDFest. PIDFest is happening again in Leiden in the Netherlands. And I will say that this tends to be more of a conference for it's certainly PID providers love to go to PIDFest, and PID enthusiasts love to go to PIDFest. Not every single entity who uses a PID would probably attend PIDFest, but it's always a tremendous conference. So ROR will definitely be represented there. So I just wanted to do a kind of a brief update on ROR usage in Crossref records, in DataCite records, and in ORCID records. So here we are by the numbers. We are approaching 1 million records in Crossref with ROR ID, which is going to be a nice milestone. And that, of course, has been going up and up and got a big bump this year from the Agence Bibliothèque of France, which we'll talk about in a minute. And those are used primarily for author affiliations, but often as well to identify host institutions of things like theses and dissertations, and also for funder identification. And some news about that momentarily. DataCite has many millions of records with ROR IDs, and of the DataCite records that have an identifier for a contributor or creator affiliation, 99% of those are using ROR. Quite recently, in a fairly recent schema update, DataCite also began to support ROR IDs for publishers. And so literally 100%, there may be a couple of edge cases of DataCite records that use a publisher identifier, use ROR for that purpose. ORCID has been seeing a lot of ROR increase over especially the last couple of years. So there are nearly 9 million ORCID records with ROR IDs. And I should say that that's of all ORCID records, but for new ORCID records, the percentage is very, very high. Virtually all new ORCID records have an affiliation that is matched to a ROR ID. So it's really just those sort of legacy records that are still sometimes using other things. 66% of all ORCID records have a ROR ID, and 4 have funder IDs. Ted, I see your hand up. Do you want to ask a question?
Thanks, Amanda.
Yeah.
99% of DataCite records with an affiliation ID. So that's the affiliation
Creator
ID type, right?
Yeah, ID type. So
Yeah.
creator or contributor, right? You have to munge them together. So if a creator has an affiliation, if a contributor has an affiliation, and if that affiliation has an ID at all,
okay,
then
great. Yeah.
of those ID types, then most of them are ROR IDs. Yeah. And then, of course, there are some data site records that don't have affiliation. Don't have affiliations that have IDs. There's plenty of those, right? So yeah, I always think of this as the leaderboard. So in Crossref, in terms of the providers of ROR IDs to Crossref, the Worldwide Protein Data Bank is actually the top provider of ROR IDs to Crossref, and it's almost exclusively its own ROR ID. This is a very widely used data repository, essentially, and they say, hey, here's us. We are providing these data sets. They have Crossref DOIs, and they are an exemplary ROR user. But as we can see, the Agence Bibliothèque from France has recently deposited over 170,000 theses and dissertations. So they are now the number 2 provider of ROR IDs to Crossref, and that's just a quite recent development. APS, I don't see anyone from APS here. I might be missing somebody, but APS has always been great at providing ROR IDs. eLife, Optica, we have Sasha here from Optica. ACS, this is primarily from the Chem Archive preprint server. Fonds de Recherche de Québec is a funder who is using ROR IDs as funder identifiers. Open Archive, we actually talked about in the last call. They quite recently have begun using ROR IDs in their DOIs. John Benjamin's welcome. The leaderboard in DataCite tends not to change month after month. I mean, it's always the same top 10 providers of ROR IDs in DOI metadata registered with DataCite, but still good to see. So now I'm going to hand things over to our Genius product lead, Adam Buttrick, and to hear about some of the things that ROR has been working on and plans to work on. Adam?
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. So the majority of our efforts this quarter have gone into infrastructure work needed to make single search the default matching strategy in our API. So for those who need a quick refresher, single search is a new higher performing affiliation matching strategy that we launched last fall, designed ever so generously for us by Crossref's brilliant director of technology, Dominika Tkaczyk. So as I was saying, that infrastructure work needed to make this default is just about over the finish line. So we expect to flip the switch on that within the next few weeks. The good news is for everyone integrating with us is that this is essentially a behind the scenes change. So there's no adjustments to the API response format, no need to rewrite any queries, just better matching results coming out of the same endpoint you're already making use of. Interestingly, even without being the default, single search is already drawing about 10% of our affiliation matching traffic from users who opted in on their own. So we're really looking forward to bring that improved affiliation matching to the remaining 90% of users. Can you pull up the next slide, please? So in parallel, we've been hard at work on a redesign of our search UI, which will surface a lot of the powerful capabilities currently tucked away in our API to our front-end users. So a good example here is our advanced search functionality, which we are also seeing kind of draw an increased amount of API traffic this year. So we want to find the best way to also make that available to all our search UI users. But really, the overall aim here is just making the search application experience smoother and more useful for the folks who interact with our data that way. So to arrive at that goal, we've got a working prototype we've put together and have started walking through it with a handful of partners and collaborators to gather their initial kind of reactions and feedback. Overall, so far, that's been overwhelmingly very positive. So we look forward to polishing it a bit more, sanding off some of the rough edges, and then doing some broader user testing over the course of the next few months. So more to come on that through various communication channels. Beyond those two things, the remainder of the quarter will largely be devoted to some core technology upgrades. I mentioned these, I think, on our last call. Just making sure that we keep up to date with all of those less glamorous kind of dependency and infrastructure needs that keep us up and running smoothly. So that's all from me. I'm going to turn things over to Riley to discuss curation updates.
Thanks, Adam. Okay. In curation news, our partners in France have continued to be incredibly active. We've had more work coming in to flesh out those institutional hierarchies of the national level and university research infrastructures. And we've also been making some meaningful headway on the representation of African research organizations in the registry, which is a direct result of our ongoing partnership with Joy Owango's team at the Training Center in Communication. But we've also seen some organic growth and interest coming from that. So we're really happy to see that developing. As we mentioned on our last call, our reconciliation with the national level registry data from NISTUP in Japan has continued, with us fleshing out the bulk of outstanding company records for those entities involved in research. And with that work being close to finished, and because the NISTUP data is so rich, we're now setting our sights on the next layer down in the hierarchy, which means incorporating things like research centers, labs, and facilities that sit beneath the parent organizations that we've just added. One thing we also wanted to highlight for today is like a lot of the folks in the community right now, we've been seeing a real uptick in curation requests that appear to be AI generated. And to get a handle on this, we've been working closely with our curation board to put in some new automated prioritization logic, alongside some tighter scope criteria to try and screen out these requests earlier in the process. The idea is to keep our reviewers' time focused where it matters most on the well-formed requests from the community and actually move the registry forward. And to help support this work, we'll also be publishing some new blog posts and some guidance on how to best submit curation requests to ensure smooth processing, which we're excited to have the community engage with us on. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I have an ROR issue number 34019.
Hi, yes, I saw your reply in the chat or your chat. We have a pretty long time for processing requests right now, about 4 to 6 weeks, but we can look at your specific request after this meeting. But thank you.
Yes, thank you. We'll be sure to get back to you after this meeting, which is more about general ROR updates. But thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
Okay. Okay. So for this quarter, looking ahead, we're going to circle back to some work on funders this quarter to help support the work that OpenAlex has been doing on their new grants index. And part of that will involve bringing in a sizable batch of new records, particularly for clinical trial sponsors, but then other funding bodies, that haven't been well represented to date. But we're also taking a closer look at various ways funders show up in funding statements specifically, since those name variants often differ from how an organization is otherwise known. And getting that coverage right is important for supporting full text mining and reconciliation to ROR. And that's all for me.
Thank you so much, Riley. Yeah, I think we've mentioned this in the annual meeting and in other calls as well, but it's been really a great signal of how popular ROR has become, that we have been seeing so many requests from individuals and from organizations for ROR IDs or for changes to ROR IDs. And so our curation team has done a brilliant job of trying to keep up with that. But we have been doing a lot of great work with these national initiatives as well. All right. With that, I'm going to hand things over to Jason Portenoy, who is a data scientist with Crossref, who's going to tell us about Crossref plans to match funder names in Crossref records to ROR IDs. Jason?
Thank you, Amanda. Again, my name is Jason Portenoy. I'm a data scientist at Crossref. I'm going to be giving an update about our work on funding information enrichment, specifically the matching project to enrich funding metadata in Crossref. So just a summary of what I'll talk about. Crossref is overhauling its metadata matching, and we're starting with funding information, and we will be matching funder names to ROR IDs, which is a transition for us away from funder IDs to ROR IDs. So I'll be talking more about that. So central to all of this is our vision of the research nexus. You may have seen this slide before. It's an outline of our vision of going beyond persistent identifiers and really capturing the relationships between entities within the scholarly record. To have a rich understanding of scholarly outputs, organizations, funding organizations, affiliated organizations, authors, all sorts of scholarly entities. And importantly, to have persistent identifiers for all of them, and also relationships between them. We're focusing now on funding metadata. So that's these three entities in the scholarly research nexus. So there's the funder, the grant, and the research output. And this is how they relate to each other. A funder can award grants. The funder and grant can both be said to have a relationship that supports the research output. And what we're going to be looking at right now, and what we're currently in the middle of making progress on, is strengthening this link on the left to between the funder and the research output. So for an example, a journal article is a research output, and as part of the metadata record, ideally we would have a link to the funder that has a relationship that supported creating that research output, that journal article, right? And so funder matching is a way that we can strengthen this relationship in the scholarly record. You might know we actually are already doing funder matching in Crossref. So this is the way it looks now. So this is in the case of when we have a name that is submitted along with a research output, but not a persistent identifier for that funder name. In that case, we try to match the name to an existing funder. So the way it looks now is you can see that a funder is identified by the name Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada. And our system assigns that to an item in the funder registry, which is a DOI. And we clearly mark in the metadata that this DOI is asserted by Crossref. If that identifier for the funder was submitted by the member as part of the metadata, it would not say asserted by Crossref. It would say asserted by publisher instead. But this was a case of our automatic matching that we did to assign that funder registry ID, and it shows up in two places in the metadata response. They're both circled here. Both labeled as asserted by Crossref. This is the landscape we currently have of funder assertions in the Crossref metadata for research outputs. This pie chart shows for any time a funder is submitted as part of the metadata, the big blue chunk there is we have a persistent identifier, a funder ID that was submitted by the member. The remaining part of the pie is the gap in our scholarly record where no funder ID is present. So we might have a name, but it's not linked visually to it's not linked to a persistent identifier for the funder. As you can see, the current system is matching close to 3 million of these funder assertions to funder IDs already. The rest are unmatched, which could be for a variety of reasons. In those cases, the matching that we currently do does not assign them a funder ID. So this is what's going to happen, and what we're working on now to implement the funder matching overhaul. We are moving towards assigning ROR IDs instead of funder IDs. So as you can see, the ID that shows up is now a ROR ID rather than a DOI, and it says ID type ROR. This is the same example where the funder name came in without a persistent identifier, Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada. And with our matching strategy, we expect to take that name and match it to the ROR ID for the official organization. Again, it will say asserted by Crossref to mark clearly that it was a match that we did automatically on our end and was used to enrich the metadata, and it was not asserted by the publisher. So just to take a step back, why are we rebuilding it if we already do it? There's a few reasons. One of the primary reasons is that we are committed to ROR. We linked to a blog post there from a few years ago it talks about this extensively. We are moving away from the funder registry, where DOIs are the persistent identifier, and moving towards ROR, which is yeah, something that we are excited about, and is definitely a step in the right direction. We're also doing this redesign and overhaul of matching because the current system was developed over time sort of in ad hoc ways that don't fully satisfy our commitment to doing things openly and transparently. So this new system is completely open code, open data. You can see exactly what we're doing, and we are documenting it. We'll be releasing blog posts and other things describing what we're doing. We're also including thorough evaluation of matching methods. I was one of the data scientists recently hired at Crossref to make this vision of doing things in a more systematic and scientific way possible. Part of this is that we are evaluating what we're doing against gold standard data sets and reporting the results. Finally, this work will allow us to have better control over the matching strategy. It's currently folded into the overall pipeline of what we're doing, which can obfuscate things a bit. Having better control over it allows us to make changes if we ever need to, and to really understand what's going on better. This is just, you can find a lot more information on the funder matching strategy at this blog post. These are just some of the visuals from it. I'm not going to go through it too much, but the strategy is quite similar to the single search strategy that Adam mentioned earlier. It was used that as a starting point with some tweaks for funder matching in particular. And it goes into, the blog post also goes into the evaluation along various modes that we did on our gold standard data set, which I put together, but showing the precision recall, F.Y score, and false positives and false negatives. Here's a timeline and where we're at now. The basic architecture for this new matching system has been built. We're working on adding features to it, such as different scenarios, dealing with redeposits, updates, what happens in certain edge cases, and testing that out. We plan to start testing this quarter, and we're going to release funder matching as our first matching task in the middle of this year. So once that's up and running, we will be moving on to our next matching task, which will be matching grant information to grant DOIs. That's the other side of that triangle from earlier. Now I'm going to seize control of the screen, just to do a little demo to show off the funder matching strategy. This is just a little application that's meant to demonstrate what the matching service is actually doing. What you're seeing is just a peek into the matching service. It's a demo that sends a funder name off to the matcher, and it displays what comes back. So as an example, we can enter welcome trust as it suggested. And it returns the proper ROR ID for welcome trust. The extras here, the image and the full name, those are just part of the demo, but it does show off that like having these persistent identifiers can be so useful. Once we have the ROR ID, it's very easy to link it to the Wikipedia page, get the official name from ROR. The Wikipedia page is part of ROR's metadata as well, and we can get an image from there just to have a nice display alongside it. But the main thing that Crossref is interested in is getting this ROR ID. And sorry, just give me 1 second. I'll put in another example. This is similar to earlier, the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada. It's got a few spaces here. Sometimes the data comes in a little messier. But it can handle that and assign it to the proper ROR ID as we saw before. We can also show an example. Here's this medical university in Poland. And if you send it that name, it gives you the ROR ID. Now, if you send it, if it happens to come in as the Polish version of that name, which I am not going to try to pronounce, but it can handle that as well. And that's, of course, a happy consequence of ROR's data being so thorough. It has the name in Polish already, so it can easily match against that. An example with a bit more spice, in case, like, there's some additional information. The School of Health Sciences is not really part of the official name. It's a sub-designation of the Macau Polytechnic Institute. So the goal here is to not get confused by that prefix, but the matching strategy is able to still do that and to return the right ROR ID. Also, the institute, the word institute is abbreviated here. It's able to handle that as well. And one last thing, an important part of the matching strategy is not to give false positives. We don't want it to find a match when there was none. So this very generic term, Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, comes in. It makes sure that no matches are returned from this. We don't identify any ROR IDs, and we don't pollute the research nexus with any sort of false relationships. And with that concludes the demo. Thank you, and I'll hand it back to Amanda.
Thank you so much, Jason. Let me just re-share my screen here. Yeah, I think that's really fascinating. And Jason, I would ask you to take a look at the chat for a couple of questions. And I do see that Sasha has a question, so maybe we can just take that quickly before we go on to Peter's presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Quite often the research is sponsored by projects or programs, and those by design don't have ROR IDs because they are not institutions. They are kind of ephemeral, but not really ephemeral because they persist for a while. And those projects and programs have DOIs in the open funder registries. So how are you going to deal with those cases?
So this is actually probably a little bit more of a question for us on the ROR side than Jason. Do you mind if I say something quick?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So Sasha is correct that previously there wasn't a lot of kind of scope enforcement or interrogation of what was a funder versus a funding program or scheme or something like that. So we've proactively done a lot of work to reconcile those assertions to their actual funders through the funder registry mapping. And because it's still very nascent, I don't want to get over my skis here. We are also working right now on constructing a data set that will map more of those funding scheme and program assertions to their funders, that we're figuring out how people want us to surface and expose, specifically for full text mining. So as Riley mentioned, around our funder work, we're working a lot with OpenAlex on this, who's doing a lot of that full text mining. So the idea is that if a funding scheme or a funding program is asserted, you can correctly associate it back to the funder. But without sort of, degrading ROR scope, and also accounting for the fact that many of those funding programs and schemes in the Crossref Funder Registry are actually pretty poorly described. So, for example, the Chinese funding programs and schemes were very variably translated. There was lots of duplication. We want to avoid all of that. So we are working to produce a cleaner data set because we know that this is a particularly tricky case, especially for working with funding statements.
Great. And then, feel free to continue to discuss that in the chat. I mean, one thing that I'll mention is that I know that, as Jason showed, many publishers are still using funder IDs and sending those to Crossref. And this new matching strategy doesn't touch that at all. It's only for funding acknowledgements that have only a name and no ID. So, yeah. All right, with this, I'd like to go on to our next presenter. Do feel free to continue chatting in the chat. We're very lucky to have with us today Peter Aspeslagh of ECOOM, who is going to tell us about the Flemish organization Registry, which is a very exciting project. Peter?
Yes, hello. I can't.
Amanda, we're not seeing the slides on the screen.
Oh, you're not. Okay,
I
hang on
can't
one
see
second.
them.
All right, 1 second.
Okay.
1 second. We will do it. Share. I swear I did this correctly. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you see them
Yeah.
now? Okay, great.
That's okay. So, hello. My name is Peter Aspeslagh from the Flemish R&D Monitoring Center at the University of Antwerp, and I'm going to talk about the Flemish Organization Registry, which is a local extension of ROR that is an instrument to identify a broader number of organizations of actors in the Flemish research landscape. And so Flemish, this means that we're talking about Flanders, which is the northern Dutch-speaking part of Belgium. So I think that's also important to indicate. So it's quite a long story, but everything started with an offer affiliation data collection project that we started back in 2019, and we had to collect offer affiliation data for a set of more than 25,000 Flemish publications in social sciences and humanities that were not included in the Web of Science and that are part of the Flemish research output. So we did not have any reference database for them. And so there was a lot of, but we needed to collect that data. But there was a lot of manual work for that. And for each of these 25,000 publications, we started and added assigning organization identifiers to the authors. And therefore, back in the days, we used GRID, and which has now become ROR. But after a while, we found out that a substantial number of organizations were not available in ROR. So a substantial number of organizations that we found on the publications were not available in ROR. And so we developed a system where we could add new organizations to a local ROR copy. And so, as you see in the right side of the screen, so there were a lot of organizations that were mentioned on affiliation data, but that did not have a ROR identifier. And that's when we started to develop the database. So what does the numbers, the data tell us? So for the publications or data set for publication between 2014 and 2023, we found out that Flemish SSH authors were affiliated to more than 7,000 different organizations. But of these organizations, only 2/3 were available in ROR, did have a ROR record at the time. And so 1/3 did not have one. And of the Belgian organizations, more than 40% of these organizations did not have a ROR identifier. And if we see the graph on the left, we see that ROR very much covers the education categories for this purpose, but for the Flemish organizations lacked identifiers for non-profit organizations, companies, and also government entities. So it's especially these categories that we had to be able to add new organizations in order to be able to code all offer affiliations. It's the project not only gave us these offer affiliations, but also an extended organization database. So an extension of ROR with, at that time, more than 2,000 organizations that were not identified as doing research before. And so that local ROR copy that we had became a ROR Plus, a data set of ROR organizations plus additional organizations coded according to the data model. And this ROR Plus created the opportunity for us. It gave us a platform to create identifiers and add well-structured metadata for, in fact, an unlimited number of organizations involved in research in Flanders. So it could help to fill up these voids. And it could help and this extended database to connect dispersed organization lists that circulate among government entities and university administrations. It could enhance the visibility of Flemish organizations, and it could create links between funding, local funding, and publication data. And so the instrument could provide us a way to add new identifiers for additional organizations. And so a steering group was set up, and we are now currently developing, extending that original Belgian ROR Plus dataset to a much larger dataset containing all organizations involved in research in some way or another in Flanders. So how is our registry created? So we start with looking for commonly used lists with relevant organizations among several entities, universities and government entities in Flanders. After that, we integrate these new organization lists in our ROR Plus organization database and disambiguate with this organization database. In the next step, we enrich the data and code the new organizations according to the ROR data model. And finally, we release the data on the website or via API to several services in Flanders. So at the input side, so in order to get an idea of which organizations did not have identifiers, were more or less unknown or could not be identified in a straightforward way in Flanders, we consulted several people and entities in the Flemish government, as the Flemish level is responsible for science policy. We also consulted funding agencies and universities, and they gave us feedback and provided organization lists that they are working with, but that were not consolidated, that were not, that did not have any coherence. And so they provided us with 4 organization lists that of which it would be interesting if they would be integrated in a Flemish database. So there was a list with higher education institutions, so institutions which are officially recognized as higher education institutions, research organizations. And then we also got a very large data set of almost 5,000 organizations, with all Belgian organizations that applied for or received EU funding in the subsequent frameworks. And then finally, we also got a list of a lot of government entities who were to some degree or another involved in science. So how did we integrate it? These lists. So we did list by list, and we had a customized approach for disambiguation. We used if these lists contain other identifiers that could be used for disambiguation, we used these. And one of these identifiers that we are blessed to have in Belgium is the identifier of the Belgian Enterprise Registry. This is a very useful identifier. It's a unique identifier for all companies, non-profit organizations, and most relevant government entities in Belgium. They have such an identifier. And that identifier links to up-to-date address information, data about its legal entity type, data about activity codes. So it was a very interesting and useful tool to deduplicate organizations from these different lists and merge them into one Flemish organization database. So after the integration of these different organizations originating from different lists in our Flemish central database, we started to enrich the different organizations with additional metadata. And therefore, we exploited the identifiers that we got. So if we disposed of an KBO ID, an identifier in the Belgian Commercial Register, we could immediately import address data and different labels in multiple languages of each organization. So we have full address data, but no geonames ID. And that's more in the lighter green. These are other data elements that could be added in the future as well, but that we are not yet adding. If the organization has a ROR ID, of course, we can harvest and integrate the metadata that we all know. If the organization disposed of EU PIC code, which is the EU Participant Identification Code, we could access address data, more specific data about the organization type from the Cordis database. And if possible, we could also add project data. And if we have Wikidata ID, we can also consult Wikidata, harvest data via Wikidata, but we are not yet we're not yet at that stage. But the fact that we have different identifiers and different new identifiers like the Belgian Enterprise Registry identifier and the EU PIC, it opens a lot of doors, and our Flemish Flemish Organization Registry acts as key between these databases. And as an example of one of these new organizations is the city of Bruges, the city administration of Bruges. So it has a new 4 identifier, and we discovered that we added that organization during the offer affiliation data collection. So as you see on the left side on the top, we saw that in 3 Flemish publications, the city of Bruges, city administration, someone working with the city of Bruges appeared in offer affiliations of local publications. And so, but Bruges, the city of Bruges was not in ROR. So we had to add that that record in order to be able to code these offer affiliations. And then on the right side of the screen, you see how we have enriched that that new entry, that new city of Bruges. We added an KBO identifier, we added a participant identification code, we added Wikidata ID, we imported address data from the Enterprise Registry and assigned in geonames ID. We categorized them, added labels, and then if we return to the left side, we could now analyze, for example, for how many EU projects the city of Bruges is participating in. And so by creating our registry, we can create a link for new organizations, for additional organizations between publication data and project data. And then on the output side, who is using or what is using our registry? So at the moment, there's an API who is linking, who is providing data to the Flanders research information space, which is indexing all research projects and departments at Flemish universities, and it is also feeding the CRIS system of the University of Antwerp. We also have a website where the data can be downloaded, and where we will, in the near future, publish an official list of spin-offs in Flanders. So we will use the database, the extended Flemish database, covering as much organizations as possible, to publish the official list of spin-offs, which are recognized in Flanders as a university spin-off, by using our database and displaying their records. And then the database is at the moment also used to code the Flemish SSH publications, and also recently as auxiliary database to code the affiliations of the institutional repository of the University of Antwerp. And then organizations which are relevant beyond Flanders, that data will be transferred to ROR if relevant, if these organizations are relevant.
And so, Peter, I'll just mention that we only have a few more minutes, so would love to leave some time for questions.
Almost there.
Okay, there we go.
So how is the database composed at the moment? So it contains the Flemish Organization Registry, contains a full ROR database, contains new organizations added during OFR affiliation data collection, all contains the Belgian organizations that are receiving EU funding, and organizations in the list with higher education and research institutions. And so in total, there are 131,000 organizations with almost 10,000 non-ROR organizations. And of these organizations, of the more than 8,000 organizations with a Belgian address, only 10% appears in ROR, and 90% is not included in ROR. So we are now further valorizing the database. It's more rather, maybe I can skip this because it's rather technical, but we will use the database to check consistency, because we can match a lot of organizations with the Belgian Enterprise Registry. We can check if Belgian the ROR category of a Belgian organization matches with the legal entity type of an organization. We will start integrating other lists and integrate and transfer lists of organizations to ROR for inclusion to ROR for inclusion in ROR, but only if these organizations are relevant beyond Flanders, and if they, for example, are mentioned in multiple publications and or multiple projects, which I think is necessary not to pollute the ROR data set. So as a closing remark, so our database is just one possible way for locally extending a global database. And we see it as an additional layer in the national open science infrastructure. So providing organization identifiers for all the organizations that are not covered by international instruments like ROR. And we want to combine the robust data model of ROR with in fact, a much extended coverage. In Belgium, we are lucky to have the Belgium Enterprise Registry identifier, which can provide us up-to-date open information about these organizations. It's rather complex to synchronize different databases because there are often new versions of ROR, and importing that data and synchronizing them with our registry is still a quite complicated task. So we will be extending it in the near future, and we also provide a more sustainable technical model and team, because right now the team consists of me, and that's not sustainable for a long-term working. And so I will conclude with just the last sentence. For me, I think the data model for ROR is relevant for all organizations. It can contain different labels. It contains all external identifiers that are important. But not all these organizations that we want to code in a Flemish context are important for ROR. And so we want to extend the data model of ROR and the qualities of ROR, but for organizations which do not, also for organizations which do not belong in ROR, essentially. So that is more or less what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Peter. That was really wonderful. We do have a few questions in the chat, and we are at time. But for anyone who can stay over, I think it would be great if you could address those questions. If not, we can connect you maybe by email afterward. But Carol from Agence Bibliothèque asks, could you explain for which reasons all those Flemish organizations could not fit in ROR? So I don't know if you could address that.
For example, because they are only appearing on offer national SSH publications once or twice. And we need that identifier to code our author affiliation data, but for some, I wouldn't say obscure publications, but for publications which are maybe not which are in Dutch and are maybe not scientifically relevant for the broader world. Well, if an organization only appears once or twice on these organizations, I don't think it makes sense also for ROR to include these organizations. And in fact, we don't have to have 10,000 Belgian organizations in ROR. I think that would be too much, and it would be. Yeah.
And then Carol also asks at the end of her question something that Hannah asks as well. Are you adding sub-organizations, so
No.
university faculties or anything
No,
like that?
we're staying at the ROR level, at the top level of the organization.
Gotcha. And why is that?
Well, so far we do because we want to be in harmony with the current ROR system, the current ROR reasoning.
Got it. And then Thomas Guignard asks, are you considering sharing the data enrichment you did, such as matching identifiers back to, for instance, Wikidata?
That can be something that we will consider in the future, but it's not a priority right now.
Yeah, I will mention
the data is openly available on our website. So
great, yeah. And I'll mention too that we have spoken about potentially incorporating at least some of these organizations into ROR. That would be a major curation project, but we're really interested in it. And I do see that people are leaving, but I wanted to say that I think that one of the things the ROR team really appreciates about your project, Peter, is that we do get a lot of questions for people who would like a ROR plus. There are people who would like to use ROR identifiers, but add additional organizations. And so I think you had mentioned your code is open source as well as your data. It seems like this could be replicable by anybody who really values ROR, but does want to extend it in a way. We do get quite a few questions about extending ROR.
Yeah. Feel free to ask or to email me or to contact me in some way or another. So
great. All right, well, we are at time. Thank you so much, Peter, for presenting. Jason had to go, but we really appreciate his presentation as well. We will share the recording. We will share the slides, which does have contact information, on them. We appreciate everyone who has come and who has engaged with ROR. We hope to see you next time. Thanks, all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.